Hi guys, my name is Billy and let's talk books. So today is a very special video for me. If you watched my tier ranking video of everything I read this year, you will already be familiar with some of these titles and kind of know my thoughts about them. But if you are brand new to my channel, then this will be your very first time. Just another little housekeeping thing. This is the first video I'm filming in the new year. And I did get this cute new little mic for Christmas. Thank you to my fiance for that. And I'm very excited to be trying it because hopefully all of my audio issues that I had in my first few videos, which basically was because I was turning the microphone like this and it completely ruined it, they should now all be fixed, which I'm very happy about. But I'm thinking that I'm going to do a bit more kind of experimenting with my next few videos, kind of see which angles work best, whereabouts in the room I can film, and I'm trying out a new camera today as well, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, those are just the small things. Let's get going with this video. So if you've clicked on this video, you know that this is going to be my first foray into BookTok. So obviously everybody in their nan has now heard of BookTok, and it has really done a huge thing for reading in the 21st century, in my opinion. I have found that because of BookTok, reading is not only becoming popularized again, but buying and reading physical books has become popularized again. You see sections in supermarkets and in bookshops of BookTok recommendations. I feel like it's really brought in the younger generation back to reading. And so I feel like there is a lot of positives that have come out of BookTok. I feel like, being from an academic background, a lot of the time things like BookTok and popular culture and certain genres really get frowned upon. But one of my biggest enjoyments out of study was looking at those popular culture things, the things that kind of get looked down upon and talked down on, and trying to come at it from the other angle and seeing the positives that they bring in terms of community and in terms of engagement with literature and conversations that it can spark and the generations that can come together. And I think that there's a lot of positives to be said here. Now, I haven't really read any of the so-called BookTok books, and I see these, like I said, when I'm walking around, when I go into shops, and also just on social media platforms. There are certain books that pop up time and time again, and so I wanted to kind of dip my toes in the water of what is so-called BookTok books, and I kind of did a bit of research, and I found that BookTok books are not just a specific genre, although romance, romantasy can be quite popular in the BookTok community, but it can be any genre. It can be a book that has just been released or a book that has been out for 50 years. I believe, what was the classic that blew up on BookTok? I wrote it down somewhere, but I know that a classic book recently became known as kind of like a BookTok book again because it was just everywhere on social media and on TikTok platforms and YouTube and things like that. So I went and watched lots of videos. I watched a few TikToks. I'm not the most well versed in TikTok, so that was a bit of a struggle for me. If anybody wants to help me out with this, right? I feel so old saying this. If anybody wants to help me out, how do I use TikTok and BookTok to find what is popular, to find what is trending, to kind of cultivate my space into a bookish space? Because I kind of went on there a little bit and was like, oh, I'm so intimidated by this. So if anybody has any tips on that, please let me know. But what I basically did was go on my home platform, which is YouTube and Instagram, and kind of checked up tags from there, typed in things like BookTok books, ranking BookTok books, reading BookTok books, and I watched a lot of videos on the topic. And basically, I formulated together a list of books that came up over and over again, books that were considered to be TikTok, BookTok books. I also went to local bookshops and supermarkets. There's a lot where it's BookTok made me buy this, that kind of thing. And so I put together a list of around about 100 books that are associated with BookTok. And I want to kind of read some of these, see what I think about them. And I'm going to be very honest. So if I don't like something, if I don't get the hype, I will say so. But I'm also not one of those people that's very snobby when it comes to books and is a bit oh, this doesn't have really poetic writing, or this isn't experimental enough, or, you know, I don't see books in that way either. I think that popular fiction, popular culture can have so much merit, can really be signifying things. So basically, all of this is to say that I'm going in super open-minded, and I went in super open-minded and just read them as I would any other book, but I want to kind of pull them together and see what BookTok has to offer. As somebody who has basically only read what is considered canon books, what are considered highbrow literature, I want to read the lowbrow literature. I hate that phrase, but I'm going to take it on with pride. The popular culture of the literary scene, and we're going to see kind of what there is. I have 5 books to talk about today, so I kind of pulled from a few different genres as well. We have a bit of magical realism, historical, we have a bit of comedy, we have a bit of mystery thriller in there, and we also have some literary fiction. So yeah, I tried to be a bit broad in my selections for this video. So now that I've rambled on enough, I'm gonna get into it. So the first book that we're gonna talk about in this video is going to be Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, and I had heard of R.F. Kuang before. A lot of people that I watch on BookTube, they always cite R.F. Kuang as like one of their favorite authors. She's quite new to the literary scene, I believe. I'm not sure when her first book came out, but I know she's very young and very accomplished already. So yeah, I had heard of her. I was excited to go into this one. And what I will say about this book is that I did really like this book. I thought it was so well done, such a fun time, and I loved the writing. I thought R.F. Kuang had some really great points, really great insight, and it did just really work for me. So this novel follows June Hayward, and June is a writer who has had not too much success. I think she had one published novel, but it didn't do very well. And so she has a kind of best friend, but they're not really friends. But this is June's kind of only closest friend, called Athena Liu. And Athena is also a writer, and her novels have just received critical acclaim, widespread appeal. She's getting movie deals, she's getting literary awards, and basically June has like this almost resentment towards Athena for her success. And so the two of them are meeting up to celebrate some of Athena's successes and her recent wins, and they go back to her apartment, and Athena chokes on a pancake and dies right in front of June. And it's all this really like traumatic and crazy situation. And June watches in horror and she can't do anything. But she knows that Athena is currently working on an unpublished manuscript, and nobody has read this because Athena likes to keep her notes and her information all to herself, even to do with the form, the plot, everything, to herself until it is ready. So nobody knows about this book, and June ends up stealing this manuscript, and she basically publishes it under her own name. And it's a novel about Chinese history during World War II, I believe, and it's a big lost part of history that Athena wanted to highlight. So June kind of does a few things to almost broaden her appeal, what she believes will be her appeal, by making herself seem kind of ethnically ambiguous. She renames herself Juniper Song so that people might perceive her as being something other than Caucasian. And she takes new author profile shoots where she looks rather tanned and potentially a different ethnicity than her own. And she does a lot of things to this novel during the process of its publication. There's a lot of editing, a lot of rewriting, a lot of whitewashing basically to the novel, and she passes this off herself, and basically the novel follows from there as we see June on this journey of becoming more successful and also just spiraling into kind of madness, I would say. It's really great, really well done. So that was the premise of this one, and yeah, like I say, I just thought it was brilliant. I think that there was a really good melding of satire, political commentary, comedy, but also some really serious and important topics. And I think that R.F. Kuang did a great job of combining these different moods in a way that felt really fun to read. I just love a satire in general, and this one was just done so well. There were so many moments when I laughed out loud, and I just thought, oh my god, this is wild. June herself, I honestly loved her, and not because I liked her in any way, not because I thought that she was a good human being. She was so enjoyable to me because she was so messy, so unbelievably dense, so naive, and just honestly so out of touch with reality. She was delusional, and being inside her head and watching her just make the most terrible choices time and time and time again was very entertaining. And I just felt as well that she was so realistic. Like, I don't know, I feel like I know June Hayward's. Lots of white people saying, you know, oh, I can't get a job these days because I have to be gay, or I have to be black, or I have to have something about me now because that's what's really seen as like crucial to society. And it's just wild because obviously if you've done any research into any of these topics, like people of color, minorities, neurodivergent people, anybody that is not straight, they still face unbelievable amounts of discrimination. They are still sorely underrepresented, and it's just crazy. Like, if you do any amount of research, you will know this, but there are so many Junes out there that don't do the research and just think that it's all a personal attack on them. And I don't know, I just found her so enjoyable to read about, because as much as she made me want to literally scratch my own eyes out, because I was like, God, how can there be these kinds of people? It's just so true to life. I really enjoyed just watching her dig and dig and dig and dig her own graves. It was entertaining, that is for sure. Because to me, I'm like, right, June, you don't understand that you aren't successful because your novel sounds terrible. You are so egotistical. You're constantly presenting yourself as the victim, and therefore you're presenting your characters as victims when they're not victims. Like, they're really not victims. So it's not enjoyable. People just read your books and you've wrote like, oh, the most wonderful, beautiful girl who's so misunderstood and poor her and all of this. Like, nobody believes you, and that's why you're not successful. It's about skill and it's about talent, and just she's so hard done by. It was so fun. I really enjoyed the commentary on Athena as well though, because I think this could have easily become a novel that was very much one-track minded, didn't have much nuance, but I think that R.F. Kuang really added a lot of nuance with Athena, because when we first meet her, we see her through June's perspective, and June is so critical and judgmental and almost spiteful towards Athena that I immediately was rooting for her. And I was like, do you know what, Athena, she seems so sweet. I bet everything June is saying about her is wrong and she's just bitter and jealous over her. But actually, I feel like as you got further into the novel, you understood that Athena was a very complex character as well. And she wasn't as perfect and as successful and as loved as the novel was making out. There was some really interesting conversations about her taking other people's trauma and profiting from it. So she does something to June throughout the novel where she takes a really traumatic experience that June went through and writes a story about it without speaking to her, without getting any consent. And there were a few other things and a few other times that the novel kind of commented on taking other people's pain, taking other people's trauma and talking about it. And I think this is a very nuanced argument, and you can have conversations about it, because while I do think that it's important for anybody to be able to write anything, and as long as they do it well, as long as they do their research, as long as they get permission and are ethical about it, I think it's important. But at the same time, I think Athena crossed those boundaries and crossed those lines quite a few times throughout this novel. And the other thing about Athena was that she wasn't willing to share the spotlight with other people of color. Like, there were a lot of things that she would say that was quite horrible. Like, she was quite cruel towards others, and I felt like actually as time went on, I didn't like Athena as much as I thought I would. And I thought that June was completely wrong. And while she was very jealous and bitter, and I'm sure a lot of her perception of Athena wasn't true, there were conversations to be had about Athena, and that she wasn't just this, oh, so beautiful, successful and loved and kind woman. She was kind of sucked in and twisted by the publishing industry as well. And I think that's what makes this novel so great. It was the fact that there was commentary throughout about the publishing industry and how it's the industry and the systems that really churns out and maintains these systems of oppression, whether that be through convincing the white author who's not successful that she should capitalize on diversity and on ethnic stories, or whitewashing certain narratives, or even lauding certain people of color as, oh, they are the representation for their entire race and all they can write about is their race, and then we can praise them and put them on this pedestal as the great Asian author. It's not just she's a great author, she writes great stories, it's wow, look at this Asian author. And I think that commentary on the publishing industry was very interesting, because I think as well that our society really does that, where there's this mirage of almost diversity and representation, and most companies these days put out schemes and put out opportunities, and that's very important. However, they don't do it with good intention. It's almost like a way for industry and markets, and especially publishing we're talking about here, to say, look how great we are, look how diverse we are, we're doing all of these things. And obviously this is not the case for everybody in the publishing industry. Of course, I'm not saying that, but in terms of the markets, they are still completely rooted in old structures. And so as much as we have made some progress, there is still so much more progress to be made. And I feel like nowadays, this illusion of representation has almost made it even harder for people of color to branch out and to be published, because they are told time and time again that they now have a seat at the table when they really don't have a seat at the table. So it's just this really like warped way that I feel like markets have taken diverse representation and kept it exactly the same whilst suggesting that it has become better and suggesting it has become something else. So yeah, I just thought that the commentary throughout Yellowface of these ideas were really well done, really fun, and really enjoyable. Because I feel like for June, if she would have just understood herself, worked on her own issues, and kind of tried to do what she is good at, then maybe she could have been successful. So she had a backstory to do with family issues and sibling relationships and the grief of her father and not feeling good enough in herself. And she could have gone to some therapy, first of all, and worked on her issues, stopped blaming the world and everybody else for her own problems that she is the cause of a lot of the time, and been in touch with what she knows. Then she could have written a great novel. But instead, she's so obsessed with this idea of victimhood that she can never get over it. And we'll go and talk a little bit about the ending as well, because I won't spoil anything. But for me, I thought the ending was absolutely fantastic. I loved the way that almost, I don't know how much to say, but I loved the way that it was almost like, is she going to get it? Is June going to get it? Is she? And then you just have this moment and you just go, okay, that's what we're doing. Okay, that tracks. Oh God, that tracks. That is so frustrating, but it really tracks. And I don't know, I just thought it was fantastic. I think R.F. Kuang knew exactly what she was doing, did a brilliant job at it, great writing. I think I will say that the second half definitely dragged a bit for me. I found some things a little bit gimmicky towards the end, and it just kind of completely changed tone a little bit, which I wasn't too sure of, but it was kind of pulled back at the end. And I also do think that there were times where the novel was putting in examples of the commentary and of the messaging and the themes a little bit too obviously for me. I think I would have liked a little bit more of kind of read between the lines throughout this novel. But all in all, this was a win for me. This one was very much enjoyable. I gave it a 4.25 out of 5 stars. It was great. I really enjoyed it. And so far, BookTok has been right, and I've very much enjoyed this recommendation. So the next book for this video is going to be Anxious People by Fredrick Backman. And this one, oh my goodness, how do I even begin with this one? I wanted to DNF this one multiple times in the first half. It was such a struggle for me. I don't think I've been put into a reading slump that bad for such a long time. I think it probably took me a couple of months to read this book because I just honestly could not pick it up. I couldn't bear to pick it up. And it's so funny to me because I remember thinking after like the second page, I'm gonna love this. I read a specific quote and I thought, yes, this is for me. I'm gonna love this. I'm gonna love the messaging of this. I'm gonna love the writing of this. And I was really excited. So this was literally the quote on page 1. It was the second paragraph. And that's when I kind of was hooked and I was like, yeah, this is gonna be for me. And it says, this story is about a lot of things, but mostly about idiots. So it needs saying from the outset that it's always very easy to declare that other people are idiots, but only if you forget how idiotically difficult being human is. And when I read that, I was like, yeah, I love that. I love that idea. I love kind of the playfulness about it and the deeper messaging. And do you know what? I do think that that's what this novel was. It was a playful idea with deep messaging, but it just did not work for me. And I'm going to talk specifically about the first half first. I think it was around 200 pages. When I started to enjoy it a little bit more and it wasn't such a chore to read, it was much easier from that point. And there were a few things that I enjoyed about it, but the first 200 pages, I couldn't stand them. I got so frustrated, so annoyed. I just think this writing style really doesn't mesh with me. So this novel basically follows a bank bank robber who goes to steal some money from a bank and ends up running out and finding a place to hide in a nearby apartment viewing where there are a few people looking around, a bit of an open house type of thing. And the bank robber ends up taking them hostage in this apartment, and it kind of goes from there, really. So the reason I really didn't like it was because it was almost told in a very silly kind of way. There was so much repetition. Like, I think I heard, this is a story about idiots about 50 times. And also, but this isn't actually a story about idiots. Maybe this is a story about a bridge. Maybe this is a story about a bunny. Maybe this is a story about this. But it's not a story about idiots. But it is a story about idiots. And I was like, just pounding my head, like if I hear a repeated phrase one more time, like I'm so done with it. It is so frustrating. It feels so patronizing. It feels so silly. It just felt almost insulting to my intelligence. Like, I feel like the novel told us, again, about 20 times that the bank robber was an idiot because it was a cashless bank. So what was the point in robbing it? And it's like, after the second or third time of you saying it's a cashless bank, so the bank robber is an idiot, I'm a bit like, yeah, I know, I get it, I understand. You don't need to say it again. And maybe this is like supposed to be funny. Maybe this is like a comedic thing and I'm just not getting it, but it just really irritated me. And the other thing that really irritated me about it as well was how rude and combative and sarcastic every single character was. Every character was unlikable. They all were so miserable and moody and uncooperative and just always had something negative to say. Were always changing the topic to something else. Were always making it about themselves and just being so annoying. So those first 200 pages were like scratching my eyes out, to be honest. It was like claws down a chalkboard. I struggled so much with it. I really didn't get behind it. When the second half of the novel came around, it definitely explained a few things for me and I kind of got it. I kind of got what the narrative was saying, and there were a lot more touching scenes in that part, but it still didn't really change how frustrating I found the first half of the novel. So whilst I appreciated it and I understood it, it just still wasn't a fun time for me. There were some positives though. I think that there were some really touching moments in this novel. I'm thinking specifically of the bank robber and the policeman having a conversation in the hallway. That one did get me teary-eyed, and I really liked the humanity that was shown in that moment. And I think there was a lot of humanity shown throughout. There was another moment where one of the characters has been like so obsessed with this idea of buying this apartment. They want to ruin it for everybody else. They don't want anybody else to get it. They're like obsessive about this. But this character has a really touching scene later on with one of the other potential buyers. And this character is a young woman who has recently married her wife, and her wife is pregnant and her father is ill. And she kind of explains that she's struggling to make decisions at the moment because she would always go to her father and he would always help her and give her advice on what to do. And now that she can't go to him, she just doesn't feel like she's able to make a good choice anymore. And the other character is an older man and basically just sits with her and gives her advice and tells her what he thinks she should do. And it's really sweet and very touching, especially when this character has been like so awful, like so selfish and the worst. So I appreciated that as well. There was another character that I found quite interesting, Zara. So she's quite a wealthy, snobby, stuck-up woman who kind of hates everyone. But we get to go with her to some of her therapy sessions that she's been having. And these parts of the novel were definitely some of my favorites. I liked the kind of sparring match between the therapist and Zara and how they challenged each other. We got to know a bit more about Zara and why she was the way that she was. I found that quite fascinating, and by the end I really appreciated her character. Maybe not necessarily liked her character, but I thought she was done well, so that was a positive for me as well. I feel like when I reached the end of the novel, I was really touched by what I felt the author's sentiments were. I think I could tell what Fredrick Backman was trying to do and where he was going. And I could feel a lot of kindness and heart, but also like pain and sorrow coming from his words and from the page. You know, when you read a certain book and you can just feel humanity just pouring from the page, I really felt that from Fredrick Backman. And so I feel like I got to the end of this novel and I was like, do you know what? This really wasn't for me. I did not enjoy it, but I feel like I want to read some more of his work because maybe a different novel will speak to me a lot more. I don't want to discount him completely because of this novel, and while I don't think it was necessarily bad, I just found it so grating. It wasn't very funny to me. It just was irritating. I don't really like being strung along, and I felt like this novel really did string you along and never really gave you answers, and that's just a bit annoying. So yeah, I did find it quite annoying. It was a miss for me. I ended up giving it 2.5 stars, and that's kind of like right in the middle of the bunch. I don't know if I'm being a bit harsh there. It is kind of sitting between the 2.5 and the 3-star mark because I do think there was some merit. I do think there were a lot of good moments, good themes, good ideas, but it just was so unenjoyable for me to read that I feel like a 3 is also a bit high. So yeah, that's that one. The next book to be featured in this video is going to be that is the same book. It's actually going to be The Invisible Life of Addie Larue by V.E. Schwab. I went into this with such high expectations because I read the blurb and immediately was like, this is for me. I'm gonna love this book. This is everything I love and I cannot wait to read it. I was so excited for this. So this follows the story of Addie Larue, and she is living in, is it 17th century France? 18th century France, the early 1700s, in a small village in France, and she feels that she doesn't belong there. She really craves excitement and adventure, and she's only ever known this small village. Eventually, she kind of reaches an age and her parents want her to marry, and it will be to an older man who has children, and she'll basically turn straight from, you know, a young woman into a wife and mother, and she just really doesn't want this. So basically one night she makes a deal with what is basically the devil and says that she will do whatever it takes as long as she doesn't have to marry this man, and she will be able to experience the world. And this deal that she makes is basically for immortality. So she will be able to live forever and seek out the world and do as much as she wants. But the catch is that everybody who sees her and who meets her will forget her as soon as they're no longer looking at her. Everything that they shared together, everything they knew about her will immediately vanish, and she will kind of be destined to be alone. The premise of this for me just sounded so brilliant. First of all, it started in a small village in France in the 1700s, which I'm a big fan of historical fiction. That idea really spoke to me. And also I love this idea of kind of trading your soul with the devil for like a deep desire because there is no way out. This feeling of entrapment and of like wanting to learn about life and the world, and also conversations about femininity and womanhood and what that means, how it can often be pigeonholed into being a wife and a mother, and how a lot of women don't want that for themselves. So yeah, just so many good ideas in this. And when I first started the novel, I was hooked. I loved it. I really enjoyed those first few chapters set in the village in France. I loved getting to know Addie and kind of her ideas and what she wanted from life. I was really, really engaged. However, oh, that sounded so serious. As the novel went on, I found that all the things I was hoping for and I was wanting from this novel just were not given to me. There were so many elements of this that I was really looking forward to and I was sure would be a huge conversation and a huge theme and huge parts of this novel that just weren't. And I felt like they were almost pushed to the side for conversations and looks into romantic relationships and maybe just relationships in general that just took away from so much. And I'm going to talk mainly about like the two biggest love interests in this. I won't say who because it's a bit of a spoiler, but there were kind of vignettes throughout the novel and flashbacks of Addie having these kind of chance encounters with certain people, and these were great. So there was a woman who was a painter, I believe. There was a man who was kind of like, I think he was into like writers and writing and politics and that kind of thing, and we had a musician as well. So a lot of themes to do with art and beauty, and she had these like chance encounters with these people and formed these really great connections discussions and had conversations about life and beauty and art and what mattered. And then obviously they forgot her, and it was devastating. And these relationships were so poignant and just really inspiring. But then we get to the present day, and there was so much in the present day that was just so uninteresting to me. And it talks about it on the blurb, so I don't really consider this a spoiler, but eventually she meets somebody who does remember her. And this is Henry, a boy called Henry who I think works in a bookshop. Does he own the bookshop? I think he works in a bookshop, and he remembers her. And this is like a huge thing, obviously, because it's been like 300 years and nobody has remembered her in this time. However, I don't think it was really given that much weight, like as much weight as it should have been. I feel like the pain and trauma that Addie would have felt at finally having someone in her life who remembered her would have been a bit bigger, but it's fine. Henry and her interactions and relationships just really didn't move me in the same way that the other ones did. I felt like their entanglement, their relationship really wasn't a good connection. It was just convenience because he was immune to her curse and there were some things he was dealing with that kind of Addie provided for him. So it seemed almost like they connected in a sense of the other person has what I need, rather than actually being in love or even interested in who they were as people. I found that really off-putting. And maybe that was what V.E. Schwab was going for, because it was kind of questioned, like whether she actually loved him or not. But all in all, it was still treated as like the big, powerful love story of the novel. And there was so much time on it. Every time they were together, I really was like, oh, I don't like this at all. I really feel like there's not much happening here. The scenes where it was like one chapter with a character had so much more weight and depth than the entirety of her and Henry's relationship. So that just was really frustrating for me personally. Also, the darkness, which is Luke, basically the devil character in this, again, started off great. Really enjoyed his presence. He was such a like enigmatic, mysterious, dark presence. We didn't know where he was coming from, what he was doing, and he was very evil, very manipulative and kind of controlling of Addie, and he just wanted to break her, and that was kind of what he loved in life, was to take people's wishes, give them what they wanted, and then break their spirits. And I found that very fascinating. I thought that he was a great character because of that reason. And then it kind of morphed a little bit later on into him just being as simplistic and predictable as any other man, if that makes sense. Like, that's how I felt. And that was, again, disappointing for me, because before that, he was like so much more than that. And it just became, he was like kind of diminished down to, oh, he's just another man. He's not this big, powerful entity. He's just a guy. Yeah, didn't like that either. The other thing as well that I was wanting so much was Addie. Addie as a character, I felt like she had so much potential to expand, grow, learn about life, learn about the world, learn about culture. Like, she had lived through so much history, and maybe she did learn and grow and go through a lot of things, but we never saw any of it. We had like the tiniest amount of instances of her actually engaging with the world around her and the politics and the history and just all of the stuff that was going on. We had the tiniest amount of that, and I feel like that was the best part of the novel, or it should have been. It should have been the best part of the novel, was her going through time, experiencing 300 years and just having all the experience of that and the commentary on that. And she only ever really cared about herself. She was a very selfish character. She was so obsessed with like being remembered and leaving her mark on the world. And the thing is, again, great conversations. I think that all of these themes and conversations about how art and literature and music can just extend and completely bypass death, and it just carries history from one era to the next and is constantly influencing culture and the world around us, and is a way for us to be really engaged with life and how beautiful life is. Such a great theme. But it was only ever about how that could allow Addie the ability to be remembered. I feel like this should have been a huge, much wider theme. Like, let's take this, for example, who have historically been silenced, whose history has historically been erased, what has happened throughout time, who has been shut out of the ability to create art and create music and create knowledge, or at least if they have tried, it's been silenced. There's so many minority groups here, right? And there's so so much history of these minority groups trying to fight against that and trying to be heard and trying to be remembered and seen and humanized. And this novel just felt like it all came down to this one white girl who felt sorry for herself and didn't ever relate or understand or extend it beyond her own worldview. And I just felt like that was such a missed opportunity, to be honest. I get it, and I get that she's traumatized, and I get why she would want to have a place in the world. I really do, but the way everything else was so ignored. Where was she during like the pride movements and slavery and the suffragettes and just everything? All of these huge moments in history where people who have historically been forgotten have, raised up and said, hey, here we are. And I guess like it's hard because at the same time, if Addie had compared herself to certain groups, like would that have been like tasteless as well because she is privileged? It's a hard conversation and it's a hard place to navigate, but I guess all I can talk about is it from my perspective. And me as a reader, I wanted to know how these themes extended beyond this one girl and her ego. Sorry, but like I wanted more. I wanted the bigger consequences and the wider implications. I felt like this novel promised me those things, and it became about this one girl's search to be important and her romantic entanglements. And that to me just felt so shallow from what I was expecting and what I was wanting. Now, don't get me wrong, it was beautifully written. I loved the prose, I loved the way it was written, and the ideas, like I say, the ideas behind this, so creative, so interesting. Like, there's some great characters in here as well, especially Remy. I loved Remy, and I really enjoyed Sam as well. Luke as well, before his character was kind of ruined for me. And like, there were some good things about it. Like I say, I think the first half of the novel was so much better for me than the second half. I kind of had a prediction like throughout the whole novel as well of what I thought was happening, and I think it would have been so much better if I was right. Just saying. I thought that Henry, who is the boy she meets who remembers her, it's kind of like said that she always meets a specific guy with like black curly hair, and they all look very similar, and they all look like Luke, the darkness. And I just had this theory that Henry was actually Luke this whole time, and he was like a human iteration of Luke, and Luke was just messing with her, and this was his final test for her, which I suppose it was in a way, but I really wanted it to like be last minute that it was actually him the whole time. I would have loved that. I thought that would have been great. I felt like that would have been way more true to both characters as well, right? Because it would have forced Addie to face the fact that she is just looking and searching for the answers in a romantic relationship rather than the world around her. And it would have said how Luke is just this evil presence that is just out to try and mess with people and get his way and break people's spirits. Like, that just felt like it would be way more fun. So I was sad that didn't happen. The ending, again, it was okay. But yeah, this one for me, I keep thinking about it and keep thinking it could have been everything I loved. It could have been social commentary. It could have been exploration of art and literature and beauty. It could have been a conversation about the meaning of life and the development of characters and a huge journey, a huge arc, and also how evil impacts us and how history is formed and how people who are forgotten and voiceless end up rising up and finding ways. Like, it could have been so much, and it just wasn't what I wanted. So I was very upset by this. I will read another V. Schwab novel because, one, I know that she is so loved, and two, I thought the ideas and the writing were fantastic, just maybe not the best execution here. But yeah, that was that for me. I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5 with big regrets because I wanted to love this. I really thought this would be a 5 for me, so yeah, I'm very sad about this. I almost even feel like 3.5 is a bit generous, but I'm just going to go with that because there was a lot of good here. So the next novel that I'm going to talk about is going to be Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. This is a really short book. I think I read it in like a couple of hours, and this one really impacted me a lot. I thought it was stunning. This one follows Bill Furlong, who is a coal merchant. He sells and delivers coal to houses in a small rural town in Ireland. It's set during the 1980s, and it's during Christmas time as well. And while he is making his deliveries, he discovers something going on in the church's like dwellings, something that doesn't really fit right with him, and he kind of investigates a little bit and it goes from there really. I don't want to say too much. I thought that this was fantastic. I don't really know the best way to describe it other than just, like, I feel like I need to talk about it like this. Like, it was so graceful and just delicate and gentle. It was powerful and moving, but in such a subtle and quiet way. And I felt that the atmosphere of winter in this small town was just exquisite. It was so brilliant, and you really felt like you were there. And even the conversations and the themes that came from this novel were just done so subtly and gently, but so powerfully. And I think that I haven't seen another novel of this small size do so much to say what it wanted to say in the most quiet and unassuming way. It didn't overdo anything. It very much let it sit with its reader. It just presented things how they were, and it was so touching. A lot of the themes in this are to do with complicity and people turning their backs on those in need and not getting involved in things that don't affect them personally. And our main character, Bill Furlong, like he experienced a difficult upbringing and kind of was rejected a little bit by society, but him and his mother had been taken in by a woman who kind of did more than she had to do, and it instilled these ideas into Bill, into our main character. And he is basically just a father trying to make a life for him and his wife and his 5 daughters, but he's unable to just witness somebody else's suffering and not do something about it. And it was just done so well. It had like a quiet dignity to it, and it was really beautiful for that reason. And it's really stuck with me. I've really been thinking about it a lot. I just think that it didn't need to do anything flashy. It very much just set out with a certain idea, a certain concept in a certain place, and explored that exactly as it needed to be explored. There were also some really interesting conversations about Irish history and the influence of the church and how religious values and certain restrictive rules, especially for women, had such dire, horrible consequences for both women and children. And I didn't know much about this beforehand, but I did a lot of research afterwards. It's to do with kind of the Magdalene houses and women who became pregnant as teenagers or out of wedlock and how they were treated by the church. And it's just horrific. So I just thought that the way the novel brought these issues to light in the way that it did was really moving. It had such great messaging to do with those people who are rejected from society or who are judged for things completely beyond their control, and how people can be treated and others can just allow it to happen. It very much explained and explored like the discrepancies between how certain individuals are treated in the world. So yeah, I just thought it was stunning. Really loved this one. I would highly recommend it. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. It ended up making it, I think, as my top 5 of the year. I think it was number 5 on my favorites of the year. So this one was an absolute win for me, and I just absolutely loved it. So the last book that we're going to talk about today is a mystery thriller, and that is The Housemaid by Frieda McFadden. And I've heard a lot of hype about this one. Obviously, it's becoming a movie. And so for me, I think that I found this one utterly ridiculous, but a real fun time. That's kind of the best way I can think to describe it. This one follows Millie, who has recently been released from prison and is desperate for a job so that she won't be sent back. I think maybe she's on parole or something. And so she basically gets hired as a housemaid for this rich family, and she moves in with them basically straight away. And all is not as it seems within this family and within this house. And it's kind of us going on this journey with her as she deals with some very bizarre and strange goings on and tries to uncover the truth of what she has kind of got herself into. A lot of this just to me made no sense a lot of the time. Like, I think the main character of Millie was just very ridiculous, honestly. Like, this is a girl who has been in prison for years, and is it like 10 years that she's been in prison? And she is the most naive and gullible and just silly protagonist. Like, I get that she needs this job, so she kind of doesn't want to question things, but at the same time, it wasn't her being like, that's very odd, that's very sinister, that's very strange, maybe I should like question that. She very much was just like, that's odd, well, it's probably nothing. Like over and over again, and I just thought that was very unrealistic. But it was fun. It was funny, even though it was quite juvenile and eye-rolling. I did think that it was so fast-paced and easy to read, and I very much wanted to watch and just see what happened next. I thought that the characters were interesting. They were all very tropey and stereotypical, I think, quite one-dimensional, but at the same time, there was some interesting stuff going on, and there were some interesting developments, even though I do think that a lot of the big plot twists and the stuff that happened, I could see coming. I predicted like the main twist quite early on because it just seemed like that was where the story was going. Things just didn't really add up for me, so I was like, well, clearly there's something else going on, and there was. So, and also just I felt like Millie was just the worst, honestly. She was so unlikable. I really did not enjoy her. She was so judgmental and like lacking in any accountability, or she was just always like excusing her own actions and being really mean and horrible in her head, and like going after another woman's husband but being like, well, serves her right, you know, like she was just a bit of a bitch, to be honest, and she was so annoying and just like predictable as well that I really didn't like being inside her head. It made the novel feel a lot younger than maybe it should have. But like I say, I had fun with it. I enjoyed reading it. I read it in like one day, and you know, I think that there are times when a novel like this is needed. Like you want to just sit down, get pulled into a book and just laugh a little bit about how silly it is. But it's kind of like a guilty pleasure. I feel like this was a guilty pleasure read. Like I did enjoy it, but I couldn't find any depth to it really. I guess the ending and the conversations that were had about certain things, but even those, I don't think they were done very well, to be honest. It was quite surface level and stereotypical. I don't know, maybe it would have been better if we weren't inside Millie's head. Maybe the movie will do it a lot better because we're not stuck with her just absolute annoying juvenile thoughts all the time. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. I said it in my ranking video as well, but I very much would like to see Amanda Seyfried play this type of a role, so I'm quite excited for that. But yeah, this one I gave 2.75 out of 5, and it was enjoyable. It was fine. So that is going to be the end of the video. I think the main thing that I found from this was that BookTok has such an eclectic mix of reads. There were very different genres, ideas, themes, levels of seriousness, levels of fun, level of readability versus nuance and analysis that could be had with these books. And yeah, I can see why all of these novels became popular. I do understand each one of them having an audience, and I enjoyed every single one that I read. Well, maybe not Anxious People. That one was painful for me. That is my thoughts on this. And let me know if you would like me to do a second round of this where I read some more. Like I say, I pulled so many books onto a list of BookTok books, so I'd be quite keen to make this maybe a bit of a series, and I can keep going with these. But all in all, let's put them in order of my favorite to least favorite now. So this is my order. We have got Anxious People at the bottom, then The Housemaid, The Invisible Life of Addie, Larue, Yellowface, and Small Things Like These was my favourite. They all had merit for their own reasons, and one of them even made my favourites of the year. Let me know any specific thoughts that you had about any of these novels, and also if there's any in particular that you would like me to get to that were very popular and big on BookTok or BookTube or Bookstagram or any of the book communities. And if you've made it to the end of this video, thank you very much for being here, and I hope to see you again soon. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you have not already, and have a lovely rest of your day.